Everybody ready?
Yep.
Let's go.
Ahsoka!
4 Midwest Guys presents Star Wars Rebels HQ.
Battles leave scars. Some you can't see.
Holocron. I'm afraid it's changing him.
I will never let my friends get hurt again.
Your anger gives you strength.
Governor Price, these rebels have proven particularly stubborn. How do you intend to solve this problem?
I need someone who sees a bigger picture.
To defeat an enemy, you must know them, not simply their battle tactics, but their history, philosophy, art.
I must become more powerful.
Split the treasure.
Oh, that's a classic.
One last glorious day in the Grand Army of the Republic.
Jedi and Sith, the light and the dark.
They'll be the architects of their own destruction.
The key to destroying the Sith.
Hello everybody and welcome back to 4 Midwest Guys Presents Star Wars Rebels HQ. Tonight we'll be reviewing Season 3, Episode 16, Legacy of Mandalore. With me to do that tonight is my brother Aaron.
Hey, how's it going, man?
How you doing tonight, man?
I'm holding up.
Good.
You?
Good, can't complain. Ready to definitely talk some Rebels. Mr. Bauer can't be with us. I'm sure he's with us as a Force Ghost, though, tonight. And we wish him well. Alright, so let's move right into it. Right off the bat, there's just that whole scene on the new Phantom 2 there, and they're basically talking. Sabine's kind of hesitant about going home, I guess.
Well, she kind of has been for the last few episodes, and later on in the episode, you kind of get more of a feel of to why of that, but...
Right.
Yeah, definitely is not, in a rush to get there by any means.
Not by any stretch of the imagination, and although Fen Rao, who's on board, is more confident that in Sabine's family than she is. He's like, I know your family. I know they don't want to serve the Empire, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And it's not like he doesn't make a few good points that aren't kind of shown later on, but at the same time, I think he's viewing them more as like, we're all Mandalorians. This is not the place where we want to be. We're not meant to be under the heels of an empire sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't kind of mesh well with the more warrior culture they have.
Yeah, I think, she's... the fact that the Mandalorians are even serving the Empire is kind of just from what we know about them so far, seems very foreign to me.
It's
that
definitely
they would let themselves be conquered.
It's a very interesting change for them, for people that were very independent.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it doesn't necessarily seem like it might be a long-lasting relationship, but yeah. Clearly this has only been going on for 10, 15 years.
Something like this, basically about the same time, shortly thereafter, Revenge of the Sith. So yeah. So it would take probably somebody like Palpatine to take him down, or at least submiss him. So knowing how he twists and turns everything politically, and not to mention actual
power. Pretty much anytime you see the Mandalorians, even ones that are kind of serving, none of them seem super thrilled about it, for a few exceptions.
Right.
They're just like, all right, well, we have to survive long enough to see this empire fall, sort of thing. And that means we temporarily have to work for them.
And we're introduced to her home planet, or perhaps her home planet. I'm pretty sure she says it's her home planet, but it's Cronest, I think is how they pronounced it. It's almost sound like Kronos with the crow's nest or something.
Yeah.
It's kind of a neat planet, though. It was snow-covered. Kind of reminded me of Starkiller Base from The Force Awakens.
There are some similarities. I mean, you do definitely have the forest vibe. You have kind of a winter feel to it. So... Pacific Northwest with more snow, or upper Canada. Yeah,
Vancouver area maybe.
Oh no, Vancouver's a lot sunnier.
Okay.
But you go inwards a bit, to near Toronto. That's probably not too far off.
Yeah. But I did have that thought though. I was like, ooh, I wonder if this is the same planet that they build Starkiller Base on. They're like, probably not. But
I would doubt it, just because you kind of have an infinite number of planets to kind of choose from. So you probably don't have to reuse planets too heavily. If unless like there's some symbolic meaning to having it used that way.
Well, you know me and my fan theories, so it got me thinking. I was like,
there's nothing wrong with fan theories, man.
You know, if they were going to build a weapon and they still had control of the Mandalorians by the time Force Awakens happens, and maybe they use Sabine's knowledge of weapons.
I don't know. I don't.
You know, just all that.
I don't
stuff.
know if we look at like Episode 7 that there's any indication that the Mandalorians still work for like any Empire sort of thing by then.
Yeah, there's no clue whatsoever. I actually kind of went back and rewatched a little bit of it just to be sure.
Yeah, I mean, even by the time you go to like A New Hope and Empire, like there's nothing that even really suggests that. Otherwise, you wouldn't really need to have like Boba Fett as like a bounty hunter. Like you would just have him as like an Imperial soldier, right?
Right, but Boba Fett though, per canon, is actually not a Mandalorian. He just has Mandalorian armor.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of an interesting twist.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, that is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So was that true for Jango Fett as well?
Probably, we're not sure.
Okay.
There's no, as far as we know with Jango, we're not sure what the clarification is
on
him. But as far as Boba Fett is concerned, through the Clone Wars, I think it's Clone Wars. Yeah, or no, actually, is it mentioned in one of the movies? Even no, it has somewhere. It's mentioned where he's mentioned as not a true Mandalorian.
All right. So what does that mean exactly? Like, is that he's
just that they say
genetically Mandalorian, but he's not raised within the culture, or
that he's
like he's outcast from the society?
He's not. All they say is that he is not a true Mandalorian, and that's basically
that could be interpreted in different ways,
right? So, is it because he's a clone?
Like that could be something like Mandalorians say to like other clans that were like disgraced, sort of thing.
Right. It could just be because he's a clone and they don't recognize him because technically he is a clone of Jango Fett.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that could be a way to view that.
That might be what it is, but we're not sure. There's a lot of debate online about that, and I'm sure if anybody has any interest out there, please reach out to us on the new ForMidwestGuys.com page and leave us a comment there about that if you know anything. Or can expand upon that a little bit further for us out there, listeners. Anyway, getting back to the story, she doesn't think she's going to get a warm reception.
Well,
and even Ezra's like, "Oh wait, you're not kidding, are you?"
Yeah. Well, one of the things I found funny about that is like there is actually a Mandalorian language, which I was not aware was a thing up until this episode.
Yeah.
She actually speaks through like a little intercom system, like alerting them that she's there to land. And there's an actual language she speaks for that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, have people been saying that like in the same way like Trekkies have had their own language for years, sort of thing?
Yeah,
like,
and in fact, there's been a lot of people that would say there's far too many similarities to, at one point, how far they were going with Mando culture in the books. And that's where they developed the language. It almost makes them kind of like in Star Trek with the Klingons, they did the same thing. They created Klingon.
Yeah.
The actual language and all that. Not that, hey, if you
speak... Well, Klingons were also a warrior culture, though, so that's why it's a funny comparison.
Right, that's why I think they kind of got away from it for a while, because they don't want to be,
So, like, is it fully developed like the Klingon languages?
As far as I know. I mean, there might, obviously, there's, as English language evolves, I'm sure they have to keep...
Change it and adapt it.
But still.
That is still kind of funny that both groups actually did the very similar thing in that regard.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of...
Especially because, like, even in the original films, like, the closest thing you really do have to Mandalorian is Boba Fett.
Yes.
And even... that's a pretty small character in the original film.
Well, really, when you get right down to it, right? I mean, Boba Fett is the whole reason they created the Mandalorian culture, so even though he's not Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So...
It is the reason it got kind of put into the extended universe, or however that kind of evolved.
Precisely. So
that is kind of amusing. But yeah, you essentially have a small troop kind of fly up, and you kind of notice how fucking horrible they are at aiming with the rockets. Because like it's just like stirring a couch. Like nothing's really, it's just going forward and then it blows up. So it really doesn't aim particularly well, because like she avoids it just by taking left, right, down a little bit.
Yeah, if there's one thing about the animation I don't really care for in Star Wars Rebels, it's their flying animation. It's a little bit slow at times.
I don't know. The funny thing is,
looks like it anyway.
For the rockets, it looks pretty bad. But like, there's scenes earlier on this year, like where you pretty much had Ezra like flying with Sabine. Like through like these little caverns, and that actually looked really good.
Now that looked good, but I mean, as far as like ships flying, for some reason, like their maneuvers, it's kind of like Han Solo and A New Hope when they first get on the Millennium Falcon, and they're like, "Look, there's 2 Star Destroyers coming for us. It's all right. I know a few maneuvers," and it's just the Falcon slowly lift, just kind of going off to the right.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, that's a maneuver. Okay, but
turning
right.
they
didn't have the technology to do it, obviously, but. At the time, but still, it's kind of like that. So if there's one thing I have to be critical about their animation, it is their some of their space battle scenes. You can kind of see it. It almost looks like the ship is moving in slow motion at times.
Well, I mean, that makes sense for some of the bigger ships like the destroyers and such, but like for the small ones that actually are meant to be more maneuverable and acrobatic, that doesn't necessarily seem like it works for it as well.
The only time they really did really good animation, I thought, with any kind of ship was when they did the B-Wing episode last season.
Oh, okay. That was the Hera one, right?
Yeah, where she got the hold of the B-Wing, and I thought that was pretty good for the B-Wing and stuff.
Yeah, that one actually wasn't bad.
Yeah. So, but other than that, they kind of, I don't know if they cheapen up on the animation or you're only using so many stills or something, or they're repeating stills. It just looks weird.
Either that or they're just like, this isn't really going to do as well as in the kid show anyway. It's not going to be a focus. We got lightsaber battles to animate.
Right, exactly.
And admittedly, the lightsaber battles are pretty damn cool.
Yeah, I really like
if you got to twerk the budget for it, I kind of get it.
And some people don't like the lightsabers in the series. I like them because they seem more like from A New Hope because they're actually very thin looking, and where in the movies they kind of have like that big, huge feel to it.
Really, I never got that.
Oh yeah, if you watch Rebels, next time you watch Rebels, and they ignite a lightsaber, look compared to what it is in the movies, and it's actually very narrow.
Well, for certain lightsabers, you definitely see it. For Kanan's, for example, it's very rapier-like.
Yes.
Whereas the dark saber is much more katana-like, and you have Vader's, which is actually kind of closer to katana as well. Yeah, but I think that's somewhat intentional.
If you look at Ezra's blade is the same way. Ezra and Kanan's blades are very, very fine.
I always assumed that was just the style of the lightsaber itself, more so than like the actual animation of the lightsaber. Though,
even when I thought what's it called, Vader's was really small, like thin compared to what you see in the movies.
I mean, maybe slightly, but it definitely does seem like a thicker like lightsaber than you have for like both Ezra and Kanan.
But I don't know, it seems like every trilogy.
And it's hard to say with Ahsoka because she has like the 2 little.
She does blades. She does the side blade thing, which makes it look like katanas, but in reality they're not. So
it'd be more like the short katana thing, right?
Kind of, yeah.
I can't remember the name.
They're actually long, but they're longer than the short katana. I can't remember the name of it either now.
Yeah.
But it seems like every.
I don't know, it's just like we also saw Maul's like saber this season as well, and that one doesn't look noticeably that much shorter or like thinner.
To me, they're thinner. They all look thinner to me, and they look more refined, like they were in the original trilogy. Then the prequels, they kind of made them look bigger, and then Force Awakens. Not only did they make them look bigger, but they turned up the bass. Like when they ignite the lightsaber in Force Awakens, you hear that son of a bitch.
A little bit, but I think part of that is especially once you get to like Kylo Ren, where it's definitely going for more of a European sword.
Yeah, Kylo,
like feel where it's going to be a longer broadsword.
Kylo's makes sense though because he's using a cracked kyber crystal.
Yeah, which is also why it like has that almost electrical spark thing,
like fire. It's almost like a fire sword. Getting back to the old D&D days, but but. Like when they ignite Anakin's old lightsaber in Force Awakens, they put some serious bass on it. I mean, you can hear it's like, that was the big effect. But now that
I think even by the time you get to the prequels, like they were kind of amping up the special effects because they had the ability to.
So, but now that we've gone through the history of lightsabers,
well, not a very in-depth history, just us kind of comparing them.
Slight overview for you. So let's talk about. She doesn't receive the greatest reception in the world. She didn't think she would, and they pretty much shoot her down.
Yeah, which is kind of force her to land because pretty much they are right on top of the ship because the actual rockets don't work.
Yeah.
So they actually, I guess, just blast straight into the engine with kind of a precision strike.
Yeah, very precision, and it was very quick, and they knew exactly where to hit the ship. So that shows you, I guess, their technical expertise, if nothing else.
It's almost interesting because you're like, oh, I guess you can do that way. Like, I'm just used to, like, ships blowing up in space, like, where oxygen doesn't exist. Or exists in such small quantities it really shouldn't be flammable.
That's why it's fantasy.
Yeah. But this was just like, oh yeah, just shoot out the tires. Done. Land. Take them hostage.
Right.
It was like, oh shit. That's an option. We can do that more often. It's weird that doesn't happen, actually.
And we also find out, though, that Sabine has a brother. She kind of mentioned him last episode, but now we finally meet him. His name is Tristan, which I don't know if that's a very Mandalorian name. I when I think of Tristan, I don't think of very manly men.
You think of someone selling sunglasses?
Something like that, you know. Yeah, Tristan just doesn't ring.
It's a very kind of posh white name. Yeah.
And he's not white at all. I mean, he's got the tan look kind of like Sabine does. So yeah. So I don't know.
It's just in terms of name, like that's what comes to mind.
It doesn't ring warrior to me.
Yeah, it's very just upper classy sort of like.
This is Tristan.
Yeah.
Hello, Tristan. Yeah. But anyway, so we meet Tristan. He apparently now serves the Empire.
Yeah, so he serves under the guy that's technically running the Mandalorian planets, who serves the Empire.
The Gar Saxon.
Yeah.
Who we've seen in past episodes.
I think we saw him in the episode where Sabine was taken hostage, or not Sabine, but Ezra.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back on the Protector's world.
Yeah.
Yep. Concord Dawn. So apparently he serves the Empire, and basically he tells Sabine, you just shouldn't have come back. You know?
Yeah. Well,
so obviously some serious resentment going
It's
on
funny
there.
because that's more or less every member of her family she meets here is like, why did you come back? Like, you were safe. You were good. Like, no one was hunting you. No one was trying to mess with you. But now we're here, and now we have to deal with you.
So, eventually, he's escorted to... we finally meet Sabine's mother. Apparently, her mother's name is Ursa Wren, and this is where the point where I say... Okay, so my fan theory about her being related to Sabine may not be so true now.
Even though it's already hinting at who is Sabine's father.
Right.
And it didn't take an episode to get to that point.
Okay, so...
as soon as we solved, who is Sabine's mother, it's like, but there's other parts of the genetics.
So, yeah, and I'm not totally letting go of it 100%, but yeah, this pretty much knocks it down to 5% possibility. I was
there's a small chance you're adopted.
High.
Small chance you're adopted, and that still counts.
Yes, so I'm holding on to hope. But about her being possibly Kenobi's descendant now, probably not.
I think a lot of fans really want Kenobi to have a descendant, because you hear that in the Rey storyline too for Episode 7. It's that's a possibility.
Well, that was part of my theory, is that Sabine was Kenobi's descendant and therefore was Rey's mother.
Oh, really?
That was the fan theory I was going with.
Oh, okay.
In my head,
I don't know, man. It seems like it's pushing it,
which I thought would have been really cool because we would have gotten her whole backstory without even knowing who she was. Everybody's like, well, who's her parents? Well, we've been watching her the whole time. We just didn't realize it, One of those kind of things is what I was hoping for. I'm still hoping for it.
Yeah.
But, hey, it's fan theory. It's speculation. It's fun to do, but in reality, 9 times out of 10, we're wrong. So, I'll eat a little crow here and say, I was wrong. So, but it's fun to do.
It happens, man.
So, we find out, though, that Ursa Wren is the current leader of the clan Wren. She's a countess. She's described as Countess Ursa Wren. And it's obviously a very icy reception from her mother.
Yeah. An icy reception on a somewhat icy planet.
Very... in fact, she was going to put her in handcuffs and have her put on trial immediately until she pulled out the Darksaber.
Yeah, pretty much just oh, well, I guess that's cool of you to bring. All right, fine. We won't put you on trial.
Yeah, it kind of gets her an audience anyway. It's oh, all right, well, come with me then, because she's shocked to see it, obviously.
Yeah, there's a certain, I guess that's an important artifact. But even that only gets her so much, because it's a scene later, her mom's just other people are going to, fight you for it. Did you take that from Maul? Because otherwise it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of a cool little, component to that.
Because that's that whole warrior culture coming back into play.
Yeah, it's just you realize, if you just steal it, we're not like a culture of thieves. Like, even if you find it or take it or whatever, you actually have to battle for it. Like, otherwise it doesn't really count as a trophy.
I'll be honest, the more we learn about the Mandalorians, especially after this episode, to me, really had a very Game of Thrones feel to it at times. Just the way they keep talking about the houses and the clans, and
it actually to me seems like it borrowed really heavy from like old like samurai culture, like
that
sort
too.
of things.
Yeah,
which don't get me wrong, you definitely have that already, like with kind of the Eastern mysticism and like kind of Vader's armor very directly.
Oh yeah, the helmet very clearly,
very
Shogun.
samurai inspired, but.
Right.
But yeah, with this, like, you're taking, like, a lot of the same things. Even if you look at, like, kind of the building architecture style, there are some similarities you can kind of go to.
Yeah.
I mean, later on in the episode, they have more or less what's a training dojo room, which makes sense for a warrior culture.
Right.
But it's set up directly like old, like, Japanese houses that...
Kind
like,
of, yeah.
Or, like, dojo sort of things.
Has its own dojo in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of Karate Kid.
Yeah, a little bit.
Talk to drum. But yeah, it was... I don't know. I liked... her mother just seems to be very obsessed with restoring her house to glory.
Well, I mean...
At obviously, while trying to save her family at the same time, but...
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibilities that are juggled and, like, prioritized, and it's a warrior culture, so you have to put up, like, a heavy front, and, yeah, there's a lot of components to that kind of make sense, so... Yeah. But yeah, it's not necessarily the most nurturing for a gentle personality.
No, not even a little bit. But, right from the get-go, she's already throwing stuff at Sabine. She's like, the rebels are going to bring down our house. Why did you bring them here? She even goes on to say that the dark saber, that's not going to save you. It's just a symbol.
Yeah.
Even though Sabine's like, well, it was a symbol that once united all the clans, Mom. Duh.
Yeah. She's like, well... You didn't earn that symbol, so people are going to challenge you for it.
Can you even wield that thing?
Yeah.
She's chastising her the whole time. That's after the main meeting, but yeah. Then we learn that because of Sabine's creation of Empire weapons, it's apparently brought shame upon their house. People think that she's a traitor, not just her family, but apparently all of Mandalore. Which or other houses in Mandalorian culture look upon her as a traitor.
Which is weird because, like, they sent her to serve the Empire, and then she did what the Empire asked of her.
Right.
So...
only to have that turned against them.
Yeah, so it doesn't...
on them, whatever it was.
It seems like the blame would be passed upwards a little bit. Just like, well, you're the one that sent me to the Empire sort of thing. But it really, I guess, like, it's this shit flows down sort of thing.
Well, and that's, in a way, that kind of why it reminded me of Game of Thrones, too, a little bit. Because, the wheel is constantly turning.
Yeah. You have, like, that sort of, like, blame and politics thing.
Very much so.
You definitely see that with Saxon. You see that with Wren. And, yeah, I can see where you're coming from. There is that kind of... You're kind of politically dealing with, like, other, opponents. Like
other houses. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely could see where that would go.
Here's House Targaryen. Here's,
Apparently this is where Disney wants to set up, like, its next standalone live-action film. Is just the Mandalorian Empire.
It's funny you say that. We'll get to that later on in the podcast.
Oh, okay. I meant that more as a joke, but all right.
But as a result of her shame, and the shame that she's brought upon her house, which, again, goes back to how you were saying it was kind of like a Japanese culture,
Well, it definitely is
your
taking...
family, you've shamed your house.
It's definitely taking things from, like, kind of the old, like, samurai concepts.
Right.
I'm not sure if that translates to, like, Japanese culture as a whole, but it's definitely taking some things from, like, old samurai films.
Yep. And because of her traitor-ism, her shame, that... I guess you could just say House Wren has pretty much fallen on hard times.
Yeah. It clearly seems like it probably wasn't in the greatest shape even before she joined the Empire, but...
Right.
Just because you clearly are, like, have, like, the entire Mandalorian, culture kind of under the Empire at this point, with the exception of the Protectors that got killed off, like, several episodes ago.
So you got, they've had to make some sacrifices, it sounds like. They've got... Tristan is now serving under Gar Saxon just to try to mend fences, so to speak.
Well, that, and I mean,
try to
it's
keep
one of
their
those things,
stature somewhat.
If Saxon is technically, like, the governor of, like, the planet, then, yeah, that's kind of how the hierarchy would roll there. So that makes sense.
And it's funny you say that because they actually describe Gar Saxon, and this is important for those who are part of the Legends community out there. Yet another thing they're bringing back from Legends. Gar Saxon is described as the hand of the Emperor and ruler of Mandalore.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about the hand of, and this is why it's kind of important, the hand of the Emperor, if you go back to the EU, to the books, who eventually becomes Luke Skywalker's wife, who is called Mara Jade, was originally the hand of the Emperor.
Okay.
Kind of a dark side user without being a Sith kind of thing going on. And
so like an untrained Sith sort of thing?
Kind of, yeah. And that was her official title, though. She was the hand of the Emperor, and she was charged with hunting down and assassinating Luke Skywalker.
All right. So in this case, though, is hand of the Emperor referring to a specific person or like specific individuals? Like anyone that is working on the Emperor's direct command?
In the book itself, it was just her.
Okay.
However, now that being said, I think it's important to bring that up because it may open the door to bring Mara Jade possibly into canon. And that's the only reason I'm making a big deal out of this.
Okay.
Because she's a fan favorite. Lucas said she hated her, but she was always a fan favorite. It's because Lucas didn't write the books. But George Lucas didn't write the books, but he didn't like the character.
Yeah.
But obviously when they got rid of the EU, she went away.
Yeah. Well,
Disney redid it.
Disney's been taking a lot of things it wants from it just to kind of simplify its own universe sort of thing, which makes sense.
And it makes sense. And also, though, but one thing Filoni seems to be doing, Dave Filoni, the creator of the show, seems to be doing, he's throwing a lot of things back into canon in their own way. We've seen it with Thrawn, other things, ships,
I think
creatures, things of that matter.
You have essentially your pick of the best parts of the EU. Why wouldn't you take some of the best things out of the EU and like reintroduce them to where it fits you?
Precisely. Like last episode, it was, or 2 episodes, was it last? Yeah, last episode, he brought up the Jedi Mando War, which suddenly made that canon again. So here's yet another term that he's throwing back into the fray.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if they're supervising this as well as they are for like the Marvel Cinematic Universes or even like the Netflix universe for Marvel, I actually think they have an easier time with this because you have so much history. It gives you like actual things to kind of choose from. And in terms of like films, it's not as all over the place as the Marvel films are.
Yeah.
So it really does kind of give you more time to sort through it and kind of choose and pick how you want this to work. And clearly with the property, Disney has clear intentions of making this a very long-term series.
Yeah.
Like they will ride this till it dies.
Pretty
essentially.
much. Yeah, the Star Wars, as a whole, yeah.
So
absolutely.
Making sure you kind of have that off to a good start under Disney makes a lot of sense, and kind of picking the highlights and the things that are useful and the things that are making the universe somewhat more concrete makes a lot of sense from Disney's point of view.
Oh, absolutely. So that's why I make such a big deal of this, Hand of the Emperor. However, at least in this episode, they make the Hand of the Emperor almost sound like he would be the same as the equivalent as a governor in the Empire.
It does sound very similar to that.
Yeah.
Like you're essentially just a position down from the Emperor and you take direct orders from
right.
him.
You're not ruled by, you don't have an Empire ruler, but
you don't have a Senate to really deal with or you're just dealing with the Emperor directly. He will give you orders.
Right.
I guess that's kind of close to the daimyo system or like kind of the shogunate system in some ways.
Kind of, because in this case it sounds like Gar Saxon is ruling on behalf of the Emperor.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of how it works. Like you have an Emperor and then you have like shoguns beneath him and that they're kind of working directly under the Emperor and they're like ruling territories for him.
Right.
Because it's such an expansive area. So
yeah. So it's just like it may have been something that Palpatine created just to keep the Mandos from politically saying that they're not being ruled by the Empire necessarily. They're working for the Empire, but
I mean, it actually seems to make sense in some ways as well because you don't have the same kind of military system you have in place for a lot of the other planets where you have direct Empire, like army and like stormtroopers and such. So actually having them have some concept of self-governance actually might helps, maintain peace while also still allowing a military presence.
Yeah, and we also find out in this episode, I think it was this episode, That Mandalore is a collection of over 1,000 planets.
Is it really?
In its system. So it's not just Mandalore itself. It's this planet that we're on now plus countless others. So it's a very large territory that they rule within the galaxy. So that's a pretty...
I don't remember them bringing that up in this episode.
I think it was this episode, or maybe I was doing some research for this episode, but either way, it's a very large territory, and so it's probably would be best, looking at it from that perspective, it would be best for Palpatine to control it very loosely, probably, or let them. To be honest,
that's probably true for a lot of planets and areas as well.
Yeah,
like having that sort of system set up for multiple planets makes sense, because at some point you're just stretching your military too thin if you're trying to have like bases everywhere.
Well, not only
and
that,
I mean, without like a droid program to kind of support your numbers, like it's pretty hard to do, I'm sure.
And as this is still pre-Death Star time period, it makes sense too, because with it, now granted, if he had kept the Death Star running, then he could have probably taken over everything, just because people would be out of fear of getting their planet blown to bits, by the Empire, fear.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you already see a society that's, in fear of, the Empire as well, weapons, just for their massive numbers of troops and weapons and so forth.
Right. So, I don't know. Let's see. So, again, Sabine and Ursa, they do we move on to the whole one-on-one session. Some of this we've already talked about, but we find out that Ursa had no choice to obviously serve Saxon. She doesn't really want to, but we also...
it mentions that Sabine's father is a prisoner in all but name.
All but name. So, yeah, he's being kept on Mandalore from them, not allowed to leave Mandalore, I guess.
Yeah. Which is funny, because that also brings up the question of who Sabine's father is, and like that's going to be a whole other thing.
Correct.
And you also have like another thing that's brought up like near the end of the episode as well. That's kind of in the same concept of that, is because we'll talk about that towards the end, I guess. But it's weird because you even see Sabine more or less turn over the Darksaber to her mother in the scene. Right?
She does. It's almost as a kind of a gift or a leap of faith, really.
Well, it also,
to her.
Going a little bit into the later bit of the episode, it doesn't seem like Sabine wants it still, even though she has trained to use it. She doesn't really view herself as being the future leader of Mandalore.
No, that kind of took me back by surprise.
Yeah.
That she's kind of twisted it and turned it and said, well, I'll temporarily do it. Almost like she's taking on a Joan of Arc kind of, or Jonah, did I say it right?
Joan of Arc?
Joan of Arc, yeah. She's going to be king maker. She's not going to be the king, but she's going to crown who's going to lead them next.
Like, it almost just seems like she's setting herself up for, like, a temporary position more so than, like... But, yeah, I mean... I guess to jump forward, she is more or less saying, I'm not going to rule, but I'll find who rules. And you also have that question kind of pop up in this episode, too. So you have to... If this actually kind of, like, finishes up before, like, episode 4, you kind of have to wonder, like, well, who's technically in charge of Mandalore for, like, the entire original, like, films?
Well, it's before... We know through the Clone Wars, until she's assassinated, it's Satine. But after that, we don't know what happens, really.
Yeah.
Once Maul takes over and that whole... Then the Clone Wars end, we don't really know much about what happens.
So, I mean, it's just one of those things, like, by the time you get to episode 4, is it a situation where Mandalore's kind of united again, or is it still fighting amongst itself throughout that entire time?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I think we're going to find out one way or the other.
It definitely seems like dynamic. This is... Like, this episode, like, in the first half goes really slowly, and it kind of picks up pace.
Yeah.
But it definitely seems like it's setting up for, like, an entirely different arc, or for its own kind of standalone kind of thing.
We'll get to that in a second. But let's get back to the one-on-one scene just real quick. A couple of highlight points I wanted to talk about. We also find out Sabine, because Sabine asked the question, why didn't you come back? Why didn't you ever come to look for me? And then that's when Ursa says, well, you were safe. Don't you understand when you ran away?
Yeah, pretty much both her mother and her brother were just like, no one was hunting for you. Like, the Mandalorians, like, weren't hunting for you. The Empire wasn't hunting for you. No one had a reason to deal with you. But now you're here, and now we have to.
But yeah, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic. It's like, by you running away, believe it or not, that's why I never came after you.
It's kind of funny because it almost like justifies her previous position of like in the Rebels of not wanting to go back.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, she was right. She was completely right before everyone talked her to coming back.
From Ursa's perspective, yeah, because this was the political answer.
Yeah.
And her daughter was safe. Her family was safe, except for, somewhat safe.
Yeah.
They
wasn't being actively hunted in the same manner.
She was always, the thing that seems to be going on with Ursa is she's constantly trying to balance keeping her family safe and also trying to restore their family name at the same time.
Yeah.
Or,
that and, kind of upholding like Mandalorian tradition, honor standards, things like that. Yeah, definitely juggling lots of priorities, which probably is why the strict demeanor is really fitting for the character.
Yeah, it is. And then next on, Sabine asks for her help, and that's when she gives her that darksaber. It's almost like, all right, I trust you. Here's my olive.
This is my bargaining chip.
Right.
Like, this is the thing that's kind of keeping me safe somewhat. And I'm trusting it with you.
I'm trusting it with you, right. So, we shows a little bit of faith, I guess. So your first.
Yeah.
But Ursa does betray her,
Kinda. I mean, she's negotiating for her daughter's survival.
Correct.
Kinda. So it's somewhat betrayal, at least for, Kanan and Ezra. Mm-hmm. But it is trying to work things out to where Sabine can be kept there.
But, the thing that kills me, though, when she's talking to Gar Saxon in that whole video, and she's like, my daughter will be safe, correct? Oh, she'll be well, all of House Wren will be well taken care of, I assuredly. Yeah, I'm like, come on, how would you not know that he's coming to kill you? I mean, when you say something
it's definitely one of those red flag sort of things.
Yeah, it's like oh, you'll be well taken care of, I assure you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's not ominous at all, but alright. The funny thing is, like, even when he gets there, though, he does seem kind of okay with the agreement at first. When, like, he doesn't seem like he goes in gun blazing, like, I'm going to kill everyone in this house. Like, he's just like, I won the Jedi, and, well, her too. So.
Kind of, but I think he always had the intention. He was coming to wipe them out.
Oh, eventually, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he knew that Sabine wasn't going to say yes to this.
Well, that, and I think it was also kind of, it seems like it's one of those things, like, the Wrens were kind of there temporarily. Mm-hmm. Like, they're there because they have a member of their household kind of imprisoned.
Yeah, and
like, eventually that bargaining chip wasn't going to hold forever.
Well, it's like he's always got he's got his own plans and his own agenda, so he's systematically taking out all of his rivals while he's being the hand of the Emperor.
Yeah,
he took out the Protectors of Concord Dawn, all except for Fenral.
Yeah, like he's still trying to bring his clan up while still working with the Empire,
right?
Because it kind of I think we talked about this in the episode with the Protectors, where they get wiped out, where he more or less joined the Empire for additional power because his clan didn't really stand up to the others on its own.
Right.
So it's kind of, it's two, birds for one stone sort of thing.
Very Game of Thrones again, once again. But yeah, so, it's just, she's always making deals with the devil, it seems like, just to keep things status quo.
It is that political concept, yeah. So. It's interesting to kind of see that in this show, though, especially because for a 20-minute show, you really don't have a whole lot of time to get into, like, the, minutia of, like, the political deceit. And also, it is still kind of on a kid's show channel, so...
Right, they can't be real graphic about it, but you can definitely... You can kind of see how, I don't know what the word would be. You can see how dramatic it is, or how dark it is. Really, that the darkness can. They found a way in Rebels to portray. They can go dark without being graphic.
Yeah,
is what
Well, they're dark in tone,
right?
At times,
precise. So,
and that doesn't always require graphic violence or sexuality. It just It needs to convey the feeling and emotion of it,
and it does. They do a pretty good job of that most of the time. So Ursa reveals her plan to the Jedi and turns on them. Sabine,
who no longer have their lightsabers because they gave it up earlier in the episode.
Right, and luckily Fenral has been sneaking around.
Yeah, we haven't really mentioned that too much, but he stayed back at the ship. And
right, he's hiding the whole time. the sparring session again, that was kind of cool between her and her brother.
Well, it's interesting because it kind of shows he's also in on it because it's clearly a distraction play.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it was an okay kind of like sparring session sort of thing. I don't think it'd be the highlight of the episode or...
No, it's not the highlight of the episode, but I think it also shows that he's a pretty skilled warrior if he was able... Because he takes her down.
Yeah,
I mean,
he sweeps her legs.
Right, and considering all the training she's had recently, I think that's kind of a feat for him.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so...
But it's also kind of shows that how much Sabine relies like on the little toolkit like thing on her... wrist pad, because later on in the episode when she is having the larger duel, she relies on it very heavily for the small shield to the small little dart thing. Like,
right, the flamethrower even she uses that too, which is cool.
Yeah, like she's useful at multitasking a lot of things and bringing them together. So it could also just be kind of a difference in fighting style where the one local weapon isn't really kind of her speed since she's used to relying on so many different things.
True. But then we find that, Tristan just kind of reinforces during their sparring session his resentment of her for having to serve Gar Saxon all these years because, she's because of her betrayal.
Because he has to bring up his family name as well.
Right. He doesn't.
Yeah, it definitely shows kind of the burden of the culture in a lot of ways.
Very much. He doesn't see her, he doesn't see her as a traitor, but he blames her for causing the problem.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. So... Which is kind of screwed up in its own way, but...
it's a kind of a twisted mentality of it a little bit, but it's, resentment and, sometimes those sort of emotions kind of come out in negative ways, so...
Yeah. And then one of the scenes where Ursa, making her deal with the devil, literally gives Sabine's symbol of faith and hands it right over to Saxon.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, wow, okay.
Who then is actually an additional thing if he actually was able to keep it after this episode, because wipes out House Wren, who used to be an enemy, even though they were kind of serving under him, and now he actually has the symbol that united Mandalore.
Right.
And honestly, if he wanted to lie off his ass off and just be deceitful, he'd be like, "I took it from Maul." Yeah, right. Like no one's seen Maul in years. No one would doubt that.
Or he could just say he killed Sabine, who had it. Yeah. And even if they shot her, he'd be like, "Oh, well, I did that."
Yeah. Well, because clearly multitasking is completely fine in the Mandalorian culture. Like, you have, guns, you have nets, you have rocket packs.
It's essentially arena fighting.
Yeah. It's whatever weapon you have at your disposal. Yeah, that counts.
Right. Strongest survive.
Yeah.
That's the rule. Right.
Doesn't matter what you kill them with, as long as you kill them.
Right. So she gives it to Saxon, of course. Then Saxon, that's like, well, then House Wren must be destroyed because you guys have been conspiring with rebels. So obviously we have to. And then the fight.
Yeah, it gives almost like a political justification for it, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, he's like, oh well, you're obviously conspiring with rebels, so I'm gonna have to kill you, wipe you out.
Yeah.
Gives Tristan the choice. Tristan obviously chooses his family, but
yeah. You have that kind of thing where the gun's pointed at Sabine and then it's slowly turns around for extra dramatic effect. And
right.
I know he's not a bad scene. I'm just not sure if it's a necessary one at the same time.
Well, it's kind of like when right before Ezra throws Sabine her lightsaber, why not just shoot Gar Saxon?
Yeah.
But for dramatic effect, they throw her the saber instead. So for
by the time we get to the fight scene, though, it is actually interesting how the culture is pretty much no, they're dueling. We're all going to stay out of it. And that's for both sides.
And it's a good point. It makes... Because Kanan throws that right back in her face when she says, no, you can't interfere. And she's like, oh, is that worth your daughter's life?
Yeah.
It's literally... all this stuff that she's been trying to do to save her family politically, all this tradition, all these rules, trying to stay within it, and he puts it right on her. And he's like, well, are you going to...
And clearly, she's like, yeah, it is, because she didn't interfere up until the end.
Well, but she did. At the end, she finally broke with tradition.
Well, yeah, but that's because Sabine pretty much just didn't kill the dude, and
right.
He was going to
shoot her in the back, but still...
At that point, it was the duel was kind of done. So
it was done, but still, it was symbolic somewhat. She upheld culture, I guess, a little bit, but it was her daughter was more important than the duel. However, getting back to the duel, I thought the duel, like we've been talking about, is pretty damn cool.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the episode highlight. Until this point, it's actually been a pretty slow-paced episode.
Well, it's all about her family and her family drama to this point. Yep, till we get to that
Yeah,
scene.
it's definitely a lot more of the political aspects of it up to this point, and it's serving as like introduction for the character, so it's understandably slow because you are introducing backstory and characters and like more of the cultural aspects, and like you kind of have to slow it down a little bit for it.
Yeah, but I mean the way that she uses, like I said, she used the flamethrower, which was cool. We haven't seen that, I don't think, since episode 2. When Django used it on Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time we saw that.
I think that was the last time we've seen the actual flamethrower used.
Yeah.
But it was so it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was very reminiscent of the same scene in Clone Wars when Maul dueled with Pre Vizsla, who originally had the Darksaber back in the Clone Wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a very interesting fight scene because so many dynamic elements came out. Like, it wasn't just the lightsaber thing. You have dealing with, like, the rocket, like, pack, or the jetpack.
The jetpack, which she neutralized him eventually. Hers got damaged right away as soon as they went out the window.
Yeah, like, so his aerial advantage got taken down. She made good use of that little shield thing that's on her wrist. So yeah, like there's a lot of like elements for like the fight scene that you don't really get to see in a lot of the main just Jedi versus Jedi ones. So I mean, it really added like kind of an interesting dynamic, and it maintained like a pretty good speed throughout the entire fight.
It did. It really, I love the one. I love the duel in the Clone Wars, and I love this one too. I like the idea of how the ice was cracking underneath their feet for extra dramatic effect.
Oh yeah,
it was.
Actually, I was kind of amazed it didn't actually like just crack all the way because it seemed like it was leading up to that point.
It was heading that way, yeah, and then it stopped short of it. But I think the best part about the whole duel for me, though, is when she defeats him and she does the whole lightsabers right across his head. That's intentional throwback to Anakin Skywalker Episode 3 with Count Dooku and the duel at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. Where,
and I as soon as I saw that in my mind, I start saying, do it. The Emperor telling Anakin, do it. So, but unlike Anakin, she makes the choice not to kill, where Anakin does do it.
Well, as much as she wanted to like get the lightsaber back and fight for family, it's not really an emotional fight for her by any means.
It's not an emotional fight, but it's a
I think it's a necessary one given the circumstances.
It's a necessary one, but it's also kind of I don't even want to say coming of age, but rite of passage, maybe, sort of, that she is worthy of the saber, per se. But that's a pivotal. That's a good scene for her though, because that shows which path she's going to take.
Yeah, it shows her restraint.
Yeah, whether she's going to go more towards the dark side like Anakin did, or is she going to, like Luke did in Jedi, not kill.
I don't know. Do we put Mandalorians in that same like good versus evil kind of path spectrum, like character development?
The one thing I've loved
because I thought with the Mandalorians, like most of the time you view them as being more just sticking to honor and tradition, and you don't really put them on the same good evil nexus.
Up to this point, we don't know much about them other than Boba Fett, who's the bounty hunter. So
yeah, who's kind of just falls in that morally gray, just getting the job done sort of thing.
And honestly, in Clone Wars, they're trying to become a passive society under Satine. Satine is a pacifist ruler, and that's part of the whole story in the Clone Wars is she's actually doesn't choose a side. She's neutral.
Yeah.
She's not with the Separatists. She's not with the Republic. She's a pacifist neutral, and yet she's a Mando.
Yeah.
You would think.
So essentially the small transition from used to be Vikings,
right?
Now we're Netherlands.
Now we're a civilized society. So there's different. If there's 1,000, the other thing, if there's really 1,000 planets in the system, there's gonna be some diversity in there somewhere.
Like there has to be. I mean, you have different planets separating them. Cultures are going to develop differently. It's bound to happen.
And as far as the dark side and the light side, I'm still not holding on faith that she's not somewhat force sensitive in some way, shape, or form. And
but at the same time, like, and I think in this season alone, you have things like the Bendu that kind of fall weirdly gray, but we don't know why.
Well, that's the thing that one scene drives me nuts.
Oh, Bendu looking at her?
Just staring off and looking at her, it makes Bendu doesn't appear to anybody else or react to anybody else unless they're force sensitive that we know of.
Well, I mean, he talks to the spiders occasionally, but
okay,
or about them.
He talks to the spiders, but I mean, other than that,
but I mean, that's only in the context of dealing with like Kanan or Ezra. So
yeah, and the other thing that this, especially the last episode, did is it brings back what I originally thought as a kid. In a way, is that anybody can be. Originally, before they brought along when we got into the prequels and they brought along midi-chlorians and all this shit.
Which is such a horrible addition to the universe.
As a child, I always grew up believing, well, as long as you opened yourself up and then you were willing to do the training, anybody could be a Jedi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the more fun way of viewing it, isn't it? Like, because then you have that kind of like Knight's Code, like anyone can kind of work towards it. Like,
you're a
you don't have this like bloodline shit.
Well, yeah, sure, because you're a squire / Padawan. You know, you're a learner, apprentice, and you work your way up. That's how it used to be until they brought the prequels.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think by the time we get to the film that just came out,
Rogue One.
Yeah, Rogue One. Like, you do seem to have certain characters that aren't necessarily Force sensitive, but do open themselves up to the Force.
Force faith almost.
Yeah. It's like, so there does seem to be kind of ways of working around that. So even if you have like a low midichlorian thing, like you can still tap into something.
Right, you can still believe in the Force.
Yeah, but I wouldn't assume why that'd be like a set genetic thing.
It's
like, it's such a weird, convoluted
I get the
addition.
idea that some could be more sensitive than others.
Yeah.
I get that. I wish that's where the route they would have taken.
Because, I mean, like, if you're, like, the closest thing you can put that to biology is like ATP and, like, you know, actual, like, energy development in cells and things like that. And, like, but that's not a set number. Like, you can actually alter, like, how your body produces energy through work and effort.
Right. Well, what they did is they try to apply a science to the Force, and that's the problem. It's fantasy.
Yeah.
And they said it's microscopic, you know, bacteria in your bloodstream. I mean, that's a Star Trek answer.
Yeah.
You know that, but.
Well, I think with the prequels, you try to do a lot more. The goal was something closer to Star Trek than the original fantasy series, because you dealt with a lot of, like, political stuff along the lines of like trade routes and things like that as well.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think that's just what Lucas wanted to do, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just
there was nothing wrong with it. It just he took some of the fun out of it for me, because up to that point, I could be a Jedi. I just got to do the training, you know.
Yeah, like you transition it more from fantasy to more science fiction,
trying to make it
even though the appeal of it was kind of fantasy.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Where were we though before I went off on my little tangent there?
I think we were talking about the duel scene.
Yeah, so I really like that scene. You know, they mimic the Anakin scene.
Yeah. You still think she might be Force sensitive?
Yeah, I do in a way, because they keep doing this stuff, and it's just like.
Well, yeah,
really?
But I think this is a show that really likes giving those little false hints things as well.
It could be. If it's a red herring, it's a really big red herring.
Well, because they've done that a little bit, like, before. Because they do that with the owl thing, too, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's 3 owls that show 3 of these, whatever they.
And then also one of them is, like, something she paints on her, like, armor itself.
Yeah, and it's on their armor. It's just like, okay. So I still think there's a twist yet to be played out, but
we'll see, man. Like, there's a lot of places they can go with this, and clearly they're starting up like an entire story arc for this, and it could go, you know, in multiple directions.
And it's interesting you brought that up, because the next thing after her mother obviously saves Sabine is they start talking about Saxon's death and how it's going to create a Mandalorian civil war.
Yeah, because you destroyed, you know, the hand of the Emperor on a planet. Nature hates vacuums, and there is a power void.
So there's going to be a power struggle, and I don't know about you, but the idea of a Mandalorian civil war could be awfully troublesome for the Empire, especially pre-Death Star.
Oh, yeah.
As far as a political power,
well,
you know,
at the same time, though,
trying to keep power.
That has to happen, right? Like, if you have like an empire that's that huge as the Empire's is, then yeah, there's going to be issues that arise on planets, and civil wars are one of those things. Yeah,
but this is different, because if this is a system of 1,000 planets, that's a pretty big space of territory. Okay, and I imagine that the Empire is collecting resources from
that territory.
That territory.
And if that's just an entire war zone, then it makes it very difficult.
It's chaos, right? And If there's one thing I will say about the Sith is they like order. They don't like chaos.
It is funny that
they'll create chaos to get order, but they love order.
That is the funny thing about the Sith in regard.
Sure.
Like you wouldn't assume they'd be an ordered people.
There are people that will tell you that the Sith do not lie, and to a certain extent, they're right. They just don't tell you the full truth. Is the difference? If you want to be technical about it,
they are very fond of the half truths.
Yes,
like you can make that argument as like they tell what's convenient to be known,
right? In order to gain, but they are all about order and control.
Yeah, you don't really have like chaotic evil in the Sith.
No.
Not heavily anyway.
No, I don't think there really is chaotic evil when it comes to the Sith anyway. Now, if they decide to maybe create just a chaotic evil dark side user, that would be different, but that wouldn't be Sith. Sith are about control and order and
I'm just saying like it's funny because you do see that like in RPG games, you do see that like in some other fantasy series, but that's not ever like a character type that ever came up in the Star Wars universe that I'm aware of.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see, honestly, because we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
we haven't seen a chaos dark side user.
Yeah,
because if you had a chaos dark side user, not only would the Jedi want to destroy him, but the Sith would too, because you wouldn't be able to control him. Now, they might try to throw him at the Jedi.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't, they wouldn't like him.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the closest we've gotten to that is kind of where they went with Maul's storyline, but even that's not really the same thing.
Maul was just trying to repeat what Palpatine was trying to do.
Yeah, that
at
was
the same
just
time.
an alternative version of, like, so it's like,
plan.
Well, yeah, you got your empire, but I could be running an empire.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
Like, I could do that way better than you.
And that's why, Uncle Palpy shows up and decides to duel and take him out. He's like, you become a rival.
Yeah. Which is actually kind of a cool statement in its own way, isn't it?
It's very cool. That
like when you have like the emperor himself being like, okay, you're clearly going to be a threat to me. I need to take you down.
There'll be times I'll start thinking about that scene and I will bring it up on Netflix or YouTube just to watch it again.
Yeah.
Because it's a really cool duel scene, number one.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It's the first and only time you see Sith versus Sith, really, in a duel. So it's a very cool dynamic and how the whole scene is just cool.
Yeah.
From the minute that Palpatine arrives on the planet, it's cool because they've got two Mando guards just standing there. He just gets off the ship and literally lifts his hand and they choke to death and he takes off. That's how badass he is.
Oh, yeah. It's also funny because you look at Palpatine's fighting style and it's very much... It is kind of Dark Magician.
Yes. And it's
like the evil space emperor is kind of like what works for him because he uses like the actual force abilities way more than he does like the actual lightsaber skills.
He does, and it's weird because even in that whole duel, and I don't want to get on too much of a tangent, but when he gets force pushed out, he literally takes the force and takes them with him.
Yeah,
he gets force pushed off a balcony and goes, "Okay, you're coming with me."
Yeah,
it's like holy shit. While he's falling, okay, fine, here, you're coming with me. So for our listeners out there, if you haven't seen that whole, my God, are you missing something? You're missing a gem. Just
like the Clone Wars.
YouTube it. It's on YouTube.
The Clone Wars had a lot of good fight scenes, and that's actually true for both versions. Like you have like the more traditionally animated one that was by the same dude that did Samurai Jack that had some really good fight scenes.
Yeah, even the Micro series there's a Anakin versus Ventress, which is in the Micro series, which is pretty damn good.
Yeah. And I mean, you also had some with the I can't think of his name, the robot guy, the General.
Oh yeah, General Grievous.
Yeah. General Grievous has some pretty good fight scenes in that as well.
Yeah. There's one with Mace Windu too, where Mace is just phenomenal with his power. You really get to see Mace's force abilities. It's crazy. But anyway, but getting back to the whole Mando Civil War and the idea of it, this, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I think this is the best time to talk about it. It's such a big arc.
Yeah.
It's such a big story to tell. I don't see how they can do it on Rebels.
It depends on how big a civil war we're talking about.
Well, unless you want to put the Rebels in the Civil War itself, which I don't think they're going to do. I think there is a chance, and right now I'd say there's 50-50, because they keep talking about a new
they've been talking
Star Wars animated series.
They've been talking about that for the last year, and that's one of the reasons what's his name isn't technically the director for this show anymore.
Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
And
like Filoni's technically been off for like the season. Like he's still technically like a producer, but he's
still,
not directing every episode.
He does some episodes. He does some of the animation for some. He did the animation for these 2 episodes. I think he helped with that. He helped direct these. He was involved in.
But he stepped down a lot from what he has in the last couple
I think
years.
the series. I think that's why we had a lot of spin-off episodes this year, or standalone, or filler, as we like to say, or semi-filler even. Because you can kind of tell that it's somebody else running the show in some cases. But that being said, I think there's a reason for that. I think we've heard that Filoni say himself that he's got it all mapped out in his head, like Mando culture.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that, you're going to want to use that.
Yeah.
If you're going to put that much time and effort into something. So,
well, I mean, it's not like it wouldn't pop back in, especially for like episodes like this. But
and don't get me wrong, I think they could do a pop in, pop out kind of thing. They could be like, oh well,
where you're kind of doing dual storylines,
right? Well,
the only issue with that is like you're only doing 20-minute episodes, and if you're doing dual storylines in a 20-minute episode, you're kind of jumping back a lot.
And if he's got all this mapped out, if there's over 1,000 planets in the system, and it's a civil war going on, why wouldn't you do a spin-off series?
Yeah, especially if it's been financially successful.
Precisely. And Rebels remain... It doesn't... The funny thing is they always say, well, Rebels doesn't get as high of ratings as Clone Wars. Well, number one, it's on Disney XD, and not everybody has Disney XD.
Yeah.
Star Wars, Clone Wars was on Cartoon Network. Everybody has Cartoon Network. If you have basic cable, you probably got Cartoon Network. Yeah. So taking...
Well, that and you also have shifting demographics of TV viewership as well, and that's definitely a big part of it.
Right. But... all that aside, it is still one of the, if not the highest rated show on Disney XD.
I really wouldn't know, to be honest.
Well, it is.
What would be the second?
I think one of the Avengers series. Is it Avengers? I have to go back.
I think they have Avengers.
I have to go back and look it up.
They have Avengers and like Spider-Man on that.
They got Spider-Man. I think it's up there too.
Yeah.
But anyway, and granted, it's a kids show, but they've got adults that are tuning into this.
I don't know. I mean, the funny thing is, even going back to the early '90s, there was a couple Disney cartoons that probably allowed for adult viewership. Like Gargoyles was fantastic about that.
That was a good series. You probably didn't have a lot of adult viewership for that back then, but maybe a few.
I think looking back on it now, I think it really allowed for like longer storylines than the time usually allowed for.
Yeah.
Like, so I think it had the potential for it.
Yeah. So all this taken in consideration, I'm going to at least say there is, and I am speculating once again, I have no proof whatsoever, but they have not announced a Rebels Season 4, even though they've recorded Season 4. I know we're getting a Season 4. So I would not be surprised if they are holding off the announcement for Rebels Season 4 because of one or two things. Because you've got Star Wars Celebration coming up.
Yeah.
And I think that's when they're going to announce not only maybe Rebels will end at Season 4, maybe I think it's going to be Season 5. But I could be wrong. They may decide that they're only going to do one more season.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to announce this.
Well, I mean, we've already kind of established we're about, 2 years away from Rogue One?
Rogue One at this point. Maybe a year and a half almost.
Yeah.
So, but I think they're either going to do two things. They're going to announce a new animated series.
Yeah.
For no matter
They've
what.
been rumoring it for long enough that I would assume
they would
hear either this year or next.
I would be highly surprised if they do not announce it. I think absolutely we're going to find out what the new series is. Number one. Number two, they may also announce that that Rebels is ending after Season 4. I could be wrong.
Possibly.
I hope I am. I prefer they keep going with Rebels forever.
Yeah.
But that being said, so I think, so I think everybody seems to think that they're going to do the next animated series is going to take place between Jedi and Force Awakens, which it could be.
Yeah.
So that's the other 50%. But my 50% that
I wouldn't be against that either. And I think there'd be an argument for that since you're wanting to kind of increase viewership for like episode 7 and 8. So moving it jump forward in time might not be a horrible plan.
No, I don't think it would be.
But it does kind of force you to reintroduce new characters and go through kind of the whole setup of how you want it to work again.
And I don't think it'd be a horrible idea, and I think it could still happen. But Star Wars is in very high demand. ABC wants one. Yeah. Netflix is in talks. They want a show. So I can definitely see if all these people want shows, I could definitely see them.
It allows for multiple things.
I could definitely see them going to Dave Filoni and asking, do you have an idea for a spin-off series? Do you have something that you want to do?
Yeah.
Yes, we still want to do a Jedi Force Awakens series, but do you have something else? I think it's this.
Yeah.
I think they could definitely do a whole Mando Civil War series.
Would you want to call it Mando Civil War?
Mandalorian Civil War? Why not?
Would that just be the entire thing? It'd just be Mando War?
Maybe the Mando Wars, the Mandalorian. I don't know. Mandalorian Civil War. I don't know.
Okay.
It would be cool.
No, I'm just curious if you had like a title in mind, like for like if you'd like to see that
No, not really.
show.
I haven't got that far with it, but it would be cool because it would be a war within a war. So you've got the rebellion versus the Empire.
Is the Civil War taking place inside of the entire? Well, at the same time, the rebels
and the Empire are fighting each other. You have the Mandalorian Civil War happening at the same time. And if you got that going on, and the Empire has got its attention split, and it's after its Death Star is gone, they're in real shit. They're in real trouble.
Yeah,
so
it'd be cool.
Yeah, it could be very, very cool.
Well, I mean, that's the fun thing with the Star Wars universe is like, if you don't want to keep doing the same style of show, there are lots of alternatives you can do because it's a big universe.
Oh yeah,
and if you're you have an idea of what you want to take out of the, EU or extended universe, there's lots of really cool things you can kind of pick out to build on.
Well, they could even take elements of what was originally the, I think most of it is going in the new Han Solo standalone movie, but there was the Star Wars Underground series that they wrote 100 episodes worth of material for.
Yeah, or I mean, you could do something like Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah, Knights would be. I would love to see Knights of the Old Republic. I think that's perfect for Netflix. But we'll see. Yeah. But nevertheless, so that's my idea. I think there's my latest fan theory for you that we're going to get a spin-off series.
So the other fan theory kind of died down, so you went ahead and
I built a new one.
Okay,
but I'm still hoping.
All right, so do you have a fan theory on Sabine's father? Like, do you think that's a more well-known character as well? Or do you think that's just going to be like, he was some dude and he got captured?
I don't know. I will say this. Other than the eye color, Sabine doesn't look anything like her mother, if you ask me. There's no similarity there.
I mean, the facial structure is a little different, but
I mean,
it's not horribly off.
Everything is different, if you ask me. Now, granted,
well, I mean, it's not like she's a carbon copy, no.
She's no carbon copy, so that's why I'm still holding out hope that she's adopted or something like along those lines. So
okay, well, she could just take after her old man. That could be the possibility.
It could be. We'll find out.
Yeah,
So I'm still hoping, but yeah. Okay, so let's finish up the episode. Last scene, we get the Sabine's farewell.
Well, that, and you also have the whole Sabine's going to be a kingmaker thing, or she wants to find someone to rule in her place.
Mandalore, right.
So, do you have a theory on where that goes?
Who she's going to pick?
Yeah. It's like, do you think that's going to be a character we haven't seen before?
No, unless they try to introduce somebody heroic or something. Right now, I'd put 75% her brother right now, and 25% Finn Rao, but Finn Rao's kind of a distant.
That'd be a
weird pick.
That would be a horrible pick.
I think so too. So right now I've only based on who we know.
Okay,
I'd say 75% Tristan at this point.
Okay, fair enough.
Because he seems like a pretty capable warrior.
Yeah,
got a good head on his shoulders. However, so. So we already talked about the spin-off. I did find it funny, though, at the end, she gave Kanan a big hug, and Ezra didn't even get one. So he's been hunting after this girl from
I really don't see that in
season 1, and he still
I think that's your interpretation of it, man. Like,
I'm telling you.
I don't think there's, like, a big romance thing they're really pushing here. Like, if anything else, like, these are characters that might not see each other for a couple years.
I know you think, hey, you've been through war. Hey, give Ezra a hug. Nope, doesn't get anything. Get nothing. I'm like, man, that's just cold.
I don't know, man. Like, it's friends. She probably's like, hey, have a good one, man. Have a good trip. Like, I don't think there's a romantic thing there. Like, you're projecting it.
I don't know. We'll see. All right, well, we're well over an hour now. I think we have dissected the heck out of this thing. So let's just get right down to final thoughts and grades. All right, I'll start off. I'll give you my final thought and grade. I love this episode. A lot of Mandalorian even though it did a little bit slow at points, but there was a lot of family drama. We learned a lot about Sabine's family, a lot about what could potentially happen in the future, a little bit more about Mandalorian culture even. I love the idea of a Game of Thrones and Star Wars, so I give this thing overall I'll give it a solid A. I won't say A+, but I'll definitely give it a solid A. Aaron?
For me, I think it'd be a B+. I mean, it is a little slow in the beginning, but all the reasons for it are pretty justifiable. You are introducing new characters, backstory, more cultural elements. So pretty much everything that makes the first half of the episode slow is there for a narrative point, so it really is understandable. And I think it kind of picks up in the second half. You definitely have that, really great duel towards the end. It has a lot of interesting elements. And I think it's a solid episode.
Oh, it's definitely, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's definitely solid, all the way through, even. Okay, so where can you find 4 Midwest Guys? Well, we have created our very own website for MidwestGuys.com. The number 4, MidwestGuys.com. On there, you can find all of our podcasts. You can comment on our podcasts. There are links to Facebook, Twitter, Podbean, YouTube. Especially iTunes is on there as well. All those links are on there, so you know where to go, where you can follow us. All that is all available on the website. There's even a nice little personal video message from me saying, hey, thanks for stopping by. As well, at the top of the page, everything is categorized. So all of our Rebel shows are categorized. All of our Marvel DC Kings are categorized for you, meaning if you click those links, you're going to get nothing but those podcasts on one page.
We also have links to share and comment and things like that as well.
Yes, there are places you can share, you can comment. There's a contact us. It's literally just a little form page comes up. You put in your return email address. You type in a little message to us. We get it, and we will respond to you. So definitely, there's plenty of ways to reach out to us now. It's very simple. One-stop shop. Number 4, MidwestGuys.com. So make sure you get on there and check us out. It's brand new. Just came up last week. So get out there and check us out and follow us. Aaron, I want to thank you for joining us.
Yep, no problem.
Absolutely. And for B. Willie saying, may the Force be with you always.